Hey friends, welcome to the news program that's going to make you laugh, think, and maybe even repent. Just a little, so whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight, and the stories of our faith unfold.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Mormon Newscast. I am Bill Reel. I'm joined by Radio Free Mormon and Rebecca Biblioteca. How are the two of you this evening?
Great, thank you.
Fabulous. Excellent. Why does Brad Wilcox always sound like he's running up a couple flights of stairs when he talks? Have you
That
noticed
guy's in training. He's in training. Everywhere he goes, he's running.
Okay.
Yeah, he's out of breath no matter what he's doing. So that's Brother Wilcox for you. So I'll just note here, today is February 24th, 2025. I'll just put up on the screen what we're going to cover tonight. This is the thumbnail. We're going to talk at length about the retraction of much of the polygamy cartoons for children. So Rebecca will be giving us that story. That is our lead story tonight. We'll also talk about RFM. We'll cover this story, the Anti-Mormon chant at some college games or a college game. And then the LDS Church receives an award of tolerance. And then we'll conclude with LDS Temple updates. Rebecca, if you'll take the lead story.
I would love to. And look, I can even move the slides. Look at this. We're going to be talking about, and this is a headline from the Salt Lake Tribune, LDS Church's plural marriage cartoon undergoes a big change. Of course, I have an angel with a flaming sword there as a cartoon because, again, this is geared toward children, which is one of our main objections to the entire thing. So when this first came out, the original cartoon, we were trying to remember, I think, November, end of November, beginning of December. Of course, we talked about that as all other podcasters did. And RFM, who I consider a prophet, made this statement on one of our episodes of the newscast. To do hard things.
I predict this will be gone by Christmas.
You know, I keep looking at it every day because I felt like it should have probably been gone the first day that all of those, you know, very prominent podcasters started talking about it. You know, I was a little more hopeful. It should have been gone the first day. So, but I know a lot of us have been checking in on it through the months, and here it is, December, 2 months later, and suddenly it's changed, and that original version that we covered so thoroughly is now something different. So we're going to go through that and just kind of explain the changes. It was picked up in the Salt Lake.
Rebecca,
yes,
the prophet
yes,
would like to
RFM.
speak just for a moment, please. Thank you so much. You know, I think if I were an apologist and I was trying to defend my prophetic mantle, I would say, yeah, I said by Christmas, it didn't happen till February, but I didn't say which Christmas, right? I didn't say Christmas of which year.
Okay.
However, no, I did mean that Christmas actually. And so I would just say, I think maybe in spirit more than letter, they did finally, figure out that this wasn't a good idea.
Yep.
And they've removed a lot of the offensive stuff.
Yep. Although whether or not they would ever acknowledge, that it had something to do with all of us podcasting about it and mentioning the frequency of the word hard over and over, I don't know that they'll ever go there. So anyway, the article in the Tribune is LDS Church changes its polygamy cartoons for children. And of course, this is Peggy Fletcher Stack. Gone are the panels depicting Emma Smith and Brigham Young. And we're going to talk about that. Not only was it changed in some of the wording, but some of the original panels are completely missing from this new version. So the article says why the change, and this is the only semblance of a church statement that I can find about why the change. It says this chapter has been simplified to help the intended audience, specifically children, to understand that plural marriage was practiced for a time by some in the church. Spokeswoman Irene Casso said Thursday in a statement, and was discontinued in 1890. Any comments on this church statement before we go on?
Well, taking it at face value, it does sound like what they're saying is that they want to make it really clear this is not going on now. This was done over a century ago, and it's not coming back.
Yeah, that's it. And also, I think they want to clarify, and we'll get into this as we go into the particular wording, that only some practiced it. This is some. This is a long time ago. This is not happening now. And, because I think a lot of us podcasted about how, especially you, RFM, when you read that amazing blog, do you remember that? where they talked about how the original cartoons were so destabilizing for children and
Oh, yes.
families.
Yes.
Yeah, that was incredible. I can't remember what it was called now, but it was, anyway, one of our past episodes. So,
And I'll just note one thing, Rebecca, on that previous slide, we've hammered this to death 1,000 other
Yeah,
places,
we have.
but technically the church is trying to always keep the end of polygamy at the very moment that Wilford Woodruff gave the manifesto, but not true, right? It doesn't
Exactly.
actually conclude until what, 1914 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
another one in 1906, and then
Yep.
in the 30s. It just becomes something where I'm not sure that there's a date you can say, okay, it's over here at this point. I mean,
right. But it certainly was not 1890 hard stop, because there's no way to do a hard stop on polygamy. And that's actually very tragic in its own right.
especially when the president of the church continues to take plural wives.
Exactly. Yeah. No, there's a lot of really tragic stories, my ancestors included, where, they had multiple wives, and what do you do? Who do you live with? Who do you toss aside? It's a very tragic era. All right. The article goes on to say that Valerie Hudson, a Latter-day Saint scholar who directs the program on women, peace, and security at Texas A&M University, applauded the move. This revised subtitle is a great step forward, Hudson said, who had argued this exact point about polygamy. She wrote in an email, "This change indicates that polygamy is a time-bound Abrahamic sacrifice, which precludes any idea that polygamy is the normative marital state in the eternities." We're going to talk about this a little bit later with Bill and RFM. The revisions also appear to address concerns voiced about gaining divine blessings from strict obedience to whatever God commands. And that is something that was portrayed. And as we look at the subtitles, you'll see exactly the change that they're trying to make and what they're trying to deflect. So one last statement here. This is somebody who is not as excited about either set of cartoons. It says, "This doesn't solve the problem for me," says exponent to blogger Abby Maxwell Hansen in an email. "Polygamy is still just as horrible a stain on the history of the LDS Church as it ever was, and I don't think teaching it in a more palatable way somehow makes it any better." She argued that the only way to repair the damage would be to apologize outright for the behavior of early church leaders and to take accountability for having taught polygamy as a fact of heaven to girls and women since the 1800s. Hansen also was frustrated that the church didn't acknowledge making the change because of public outcry. So I tend to be more in her camp. I tend to agree with all of that because, and we'll talk about this maybe more later, but I certainly was told that that was the eternal goal for me and where I would end up in a polygamous situation as a woman in the church. Any thoughts on this before we actually dive into the text of the old and new cartoon?
Yeah, on that first one, what was it on the slide before this? Yes, the Aggie, Valerie Hudson. I appreciate her perspective. I do think that if she thinks that change to the subtitle, right, which is a commandment for a time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to show that next.
Yeah, I think that if she's saying that it suggests all of that's in yellow, that's probably overstating the case of what it's suggesting. Where she says this change indicates that polygamy is a time-bound Abrahamic sacrifice, which precludes any idea that polygamy is the normative marital state in the eternities. Yeah, it didn't come anywhere near talking about that part.
Yep, I agree. People have their own spin on it and their own take on it. So let's look and see exactly what it says. So we'll first go into the heading and the subheading because those are loaded right there and there are only a few words. So the original heading here, plural marriage, faith to obey a law from the Lord, even when it's hard. And you'll hear that phrase. It's almost a drinking game, right? Over and over in the original cartoon, completely taken out from the second cartoon. It says not easy, things like that. It never says even when it's hard. So to me, I agree with what the exponent woman said, and that is this lets you know that you may be asked to do something someday that your moral compass and your gut tells you don't do. You need to do it. It's a commandment and it's hard and you've got to make yourself do it. And that's a very dangerous path to go down. The new heading has a completely different focus in my mind, and it is plural marriage, a commandment for a time. So again, the emphasis there is was practiced, not practiced now. Don't worry, little kids who are being read this story. This isn't something you will ever have to worry about. The ghost of polygamy. How did you guys interpret the change and what I see is total focus of these subtitles?
Bill?
Yeah, I think that they saw that they are, again, we're not talking about explicit admissions here. It is implicit in the change. And what's implicit is that they recognize that what they were being told is that having children learn that they should go along with really unhealthy things, even when it's hard, they had to get rid of that. So they did. So by making it a commandment for a time, playing on the temporary commandments, by the way, by making it a commandment for a time, they get away from one of the things that they were criticized for with these cartoons, which is pointing out to children that they should obey things like polygamy at all cost. And the heading change, at least in some part, does that.
Yeah, I think that what they've done now, which is better, is they've just made it more historical. It's anemic history. It's history for, kids, and that's okay. That's good, because what they were doing with it before, and what I think they've taken almost all of it out, is trying to use polygamy as an object lesson to teach children to obey their leaders in the church, regardless of how bad they feel about it.
Right.
Yep. I agree. And they've taken that component completely out for the most part. And it's now just, in my mind, a series of, like you said, bullet points of history, facts. This happened, this happened, this happened, not connected by any kind of concept that they're trying to get through, like the obey your leaders and do it even
I think this is good,
hard.
but Rebecca, you've talked to me before about the fact that kids are smart. At least you sure were. You were precocious as heck from what you tell me. And kids can put this together.
Yeah.
They don't need to have all of this other stuff that's been taken out. The story itself tells the story, right?
No, it does. And if they're like me, they're going to read plural marriage and they're going to go to the dictionary, right? I mean, every time I heard something, I was on high alert to understand what things were. And I would go look it up and I would research it. The library, the dictionary, of course, in my pre-internet days. But these kids at their fingertips are going to be able to go to church sources, the Gospel Topics essay on polygamy, and they're going to be able to find a whole heck of a lot more than just this cartoon. So loaded, even here in the change of subheadings. All right. So I've put the former cartoon, it's in black and it's at the top of the screen. And then the new one is in white and it's below. And the text that is in white are the things that are the same. They remain the same in the older cartoon and the new one. The yellow is where they have made a change. And I think that's where we sort of focus, because there's a reason they changed it, right? There's something new they're trying to say. Heaven forbid they would admit it was public outcry. They will not. So the old cartoon in the first panel says, while the prophet Joseph was studying the Bible, he read about prophets like Abraham and Moses who had been married to more than one wife. And this is the same thing it says in the new cartoon. He's reading, he's studying. He says, oh my gosh, more than one wife for Abraham and Moses. Now, the difference is in the next sentence. In the old cartoon, it said, Joseph wondered how the Lord felt about that. So he decided to ask the Lord. Now, to me, that kind of portrays somebody that's a little curious. I wonder what that's about. That's kind of how I take that. I think I'll ask, is this something that could be for me? You could take it that way. It's sort of more of a passive, I'm wondering what this is. Then what they changed it to is Joseph had a lot of questions. Okay. So now that sounds like he could be concerned about it. Is this something that I might have to do? Where I sort of read the other one is this something I might have to do? It's kind of all in the delivery. And it says, so he decided to pray and ask the Lord. So subtle difference, but it just kind of conveys to me a different feeling of why he's asking. Did you guys pick up on anything in that change there?
It doesn't seem that significant to me, although they certainly want to make it clear to the children that you only ask God questions through prayer. That would seem to be obvious, but they have to please everybody on the committee. And I think that even these kind of changes, these look like the kind of changes that got made because they were making changes elsewhere. It's a wonder a committee can ever come up with a final version of anything.
I'd love to know the process of review and everything, given the things that we've seen get through, right? Do you have any thoughts?
By the way, if I were in charge of the project, I would change some things that were not important like this in order to draw attention away from the things that are important and make them all look kind of the same out there.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point right there. Anything you see in this bill?
No, I don't have anything to add to this small change here.
Okay. Yep. It's just a small change. So then we go on and it says, the Lord said, this is the old cartoon. The Lord said that usually a man should marry only one wife. But sometimes the Lord commanded his people to be in marriages of one man and more than one woman. That was called plural marriage. The Lord told Joseph that his people should only be in plural marriages if he commands it. Okay, so that's the old cartoon. The new cartoon starts out the same. The Lord said that usually a man should only have one wife. And here's where they change it. But sometimes the Lord commands, and in this one, it says a man to be married to more than one wife. Now, I noticed that in the old cartoon, they used the word woman several times. Other women, to a woman, like it is here. The new cartoon takes out the word woman. The female they're talking about is already a wife. The role of the wife, the ordained role of a wife. So you never have this idea where somebody might say other women, I mean, people have heard that phrase before, right? It kind of has a dicey connotation. They took the word woman completely out. It's always a wife, already signed, sealed, delivered into this covenant. And that is really the only difference. Then it goes on and says the same thing. So what do you guys think about that one? It's a small change. But to me, the fact that they took out the word woman, and also here they say in the old cartoon, his people to be in marriages. Okay, so that means widespread. In the second one, it says a man should be married. So again, just kind of dialing back the idea that this was prevalent. Any thoughts?
Not I for this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is a relatively small change as well. I think the adaptation makes it more clear what they're trying to say. I think there's more room for misunderstanding in the first one.
Yeah, I think so too. So here's where it goes totally off the rails. And there is nothing in the second cartoon that is the same that was in the first cartoon. So there's a picture of, and the pictures are the same throughout, although we will talk about some of the panels that they left out. So this is Joseph, and he's got his hands over his face, and he's praying fervently. The old cartoon says a few years later, the Lord told Joseph to marry other women. See, there's the word women, right? Marry other women. Joseph didn't want to marry other wives, but he knew it was a commandment from the Lord. When Joseph asked a woman to marry him, he told her to pray about it. He wanted her to know that the Lord, he wanted her to know from the Lord that it was right. So this is a whole story. This is Joseph praying. This is his interaction with women. You have this idea that he's talking to women saying, God wants you to do this. You need to pray. You need to find out. It's this whole narrative, kind of how he approached people about plural marriage. That's gone from the new cartoon. The new cartoon, instead of a few years later, says years later. Could be years later, right? The Lord told Joseph and some other saints. So right away, it's not just Joseph like it was in the first cartoon. Now it's many others. The church uses that a lot. Like many people do this, or like others. So they're doing this here. The Lord told Joseph and some other saints to be in plural marriages. It was not easy to live this commandment. So it wasn't hard. It wasn't easy. So this is where you really see them. And to me, the more it differentiates from the original, the more they're really trying to get rid of what it said in the original, right? So what do you guys think about this? Totally different wording, verbiage here in the new cartoon.
I'll just say, in the original, there's a sentence there that just can't be defended. Joseph didn't want to marry other wives. So first off, a number of the women weren't women at all. They were children. They were females under the age of 18, as young as 14 years old. It really is hard to figure out how the rational brain can make an argument that Heavenly Father asked Joseph Smith to marry specific children as young as 14 years old, and that when Joseph implemented that practice, that he did so by putting timelines, spiritual penalties, lots of pressure. And then you have to buy into that if Joseph didn't want to do it, why did Joseph pick kids? Well, that's because God told him. And if God told him, that makes very little sense in terms of a God either. So I think they had to get as far away from that sentence in particular. And there are other things about this too, and I'll let RFM comment.
I think this is one of the good examples of taking a lot of things out that are extremely problematic and obviously subject to abuse by evil-minded people.
That's it. The proof is in what's on the cutting room floor, right?
You know what's funny, and it just strikes me? if this language, which actually does describe kind of what happened, the stuff that the way it was originally, was subject to abuse by evil-minded people, am I describing it now or am I describing it then?
That is the question. But again, the earlier cartoon, in the mind of a child, somebody who's thinking, God tells people to do things that they have to do, they don't want to do. And you're right, if they know anything about it involving children, teenagers might be aware of that. Then, sorry, my dog. Then God is telling them, Joseph doesn't want to do it. God wants you to marry a teenager. So problematic all around. All right. And then there's a series of panels that they completely leave out. And I call these the bed panels because two of them have Joseph in this one, Joseph and Emma on a bed wrestling with this question. And my co-host Landon on Mormonish made the point they never show anybody with more than one woman. It's always one man, one woman, and they're talking about this directive from God. So this is completely left out from the new cartoon. It says, this commandment was also hard for Joseph's first wife, Emma. Sometimes Emma helped Joseph decide who he would ask to marry him. Other times, Emma did not want Joseph to marry other women. Again, the word women. And I think we're all like-minded on why this had to be taken out. But some people have said it erases Emma from the story and her perspective, which is, horrific and important. So I don't know. What do you guys think about leaving this complete panel out?
I think it's because I got a question for you, Rebecca, and I apologize, but shouldn't it be whom? Sometimes Emma helped Joseph decide whom he should ask to marry him.
Yeah, technically it should.
I think that's why it got stricken.
But it's for children.
Actually, I think they're just trying to streamline this whole thing. I think somebody actually got in there who kind of had a better idea for what would be more appropriate for this age that this is directed at and get rid of all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, I would have just omitted it entirely. There's no reason to talk about this. I mean, it's a history book. I get it. This is an important part of church history. I get that. But this is for kids, and they can learn about all these other stories.
Yeah, I'm going to be a broken record because the sentence in there about Emma helped Joseph decide who he should ask to marry him. Who's deciding, God or Joseph? And again, is it God or Joseph who picks the 14-year-old girls out? Because either one is problematic from an ethical standpoint.
Yep, absolutely. And I think if you're a little girl and you're hearing this story, you're thinking, okay, Emma's a mom and I have a mom and dad. Would my mom ever have to do something that Emma did? I mean, you think about that things when you hear stories and you internalize that, and very destabilizing to families, as RFM talked about before. Here's another slide that they left out. Oops, this is one of my favorite ones because all of the brethren are circled around Joseph and they just look so upset. Somebody has drawn their eyebrows on, just so concerned. And Joseph is standing in the middle and he's delivering the worst possible news he could ever give to the apostles. And that news is Joseph taught the 12 apostles about plural marriage. It was a hard commandment for them too. So worst news they could ever get, that they're going to have to take more than one wife. They just don't want to do it. Again, this is left out completely in the new cartoon. Any thoughts?
Well, if it were Mormonism After Dark, I know what I'd be saying. But since it isn't, let me pun it to Bill for a second.
We have quotes in early church history where the top leaders, I think Wilford Woodruff being one of them, Heber C. Kimball being another, make references to not allowing the young men to pick out all the pretty girls so that some of the pretty girls make their way to Utah so that the leaders can have them.
It's only fair.
How hard of a practice is this for leaders who are very concerned about the physical attractiveness and youth of the girls that they get to marry? I don't know. We like to paint church leaders like they don't want to do this thing. They don't want to do it. They're just doing this hard thing. It's really difficult. And the reality is that the quotes around it, the way high demand fundamentalist religions work around sexuality, the way in which celestial marriage was practiced, the things that they said about it at the time, it's anything but the way the church is trying to paint it today.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that quote is so damning. If you're not familiar with it, it was said to missionaries, written to missionaries out in the field, like, hey, no, you can't marry any of these girls or make promises with them. They got to come back home.
Yeah, Garrett,
we got to check them over.
It's one of these
Yeah.
guys sitting around here with the furrowed look on their faces
Yeah.
saying, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Now, they're actually probably worried about how they're going to go home and tell their wives. I would say that would be legitimate, honestly. So, but completely left out of the new cartoon. And the last one that was completely left out, again, on a bed, one man, one woman kneeling by the bed. This is Brigham Young and his first wife. And it says Brigham Young and his wife, Mary Ann, prayed a lot to the Lord about what to do. They learned that they should obey the commandment of plural marriage. So similar thing. It's we
Yep.
can do hard things, right? That is the theme of the original cartoon.
And they're praying on the bed.
And they're praying on the bed. That's right. One man, one woman. Yeah. And she looks, she looks pretty upset. He looks pretty fervent. Kids look at pictures. They do, when there's the text, but then kids learn a lot from those rogue artists that paint things for us to
Is that like a kid's room? Are
misunderstand.
those fish on the blanket? Is that what the pattern is? Fish?
I don't know.
No?
I have no idea what's on the
Okay.
bed. I don't want to know. So, all right, completely left out. Now let's go to the next one, which is again a difference in how it's portrayed. The original cartoon said, for many years, some of the saints, only some, were asked to be in plural marriages. People outside the church did not like plural marriage. They made laws against it. Some saints, including church leaders, were put in prison. But the Lord blessed the families who obeyed the commandments, even when it was hard. So, new cartoon, very much abbreviated. Again, sort of a bullet point sense of just, making statements, not a lot of extra commentary. The new cartoon says the government made laws against plural marriage. There it is. And then repeat from the first one, some saints, including church leaders, were put in prison. So the first one lets you know people didn't like it, right? Society didn't like it. This one doesn't say this. This one just says the government made laws. No mention that there were already laws in place. It's just extremely matter of fact. Any thoughts on that one?
I think that's probably about the best you can say about it.
Yeah.
What do you think, Bill?
Same thing. Yeah, I think this is probably again, if they're determined to mention polygamy, and they really have to on some level, right? The part of what people complain about is that the church isn't transparent enough about the problems. And so it comes out the gospel topic essays, which are completely whitewashed, but at least somebody gets an introduction that there is a problem out there. And polygamy, this is their attempt to have kids not grow up into adults who said the church never taught me that.
Right.
And they tried to get away with teaching more of it than they should have. And now they've had to pull it back, but they're still left wanting to teach polygamy. And so, you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. They're trying to make polygamy sound as great as possible, as least of problematic details as they can include. And yet there's no way around it. It's still polygamy, still religious coercion polygamy.
Yep, that's exactly right. So now we're on to our last slide, and it is the very same. The old one and the new one. They say in 1890, the Lord told Wilford Woodruff, the president of the church, that men should not marry more than one wife anymore. The leaders of the church shared this commandment with the saints. This is still the Lord's commandment today. A man should be married to only one wife. And there it is. Case closed. On to the next story. Bedtime
this is
story.
still the Lord's commandment today. Is not saying it's never going to change back or it's different in heaven.
Yeah.
Going back to what that
Valerie
scholar
Hudson.
at A&M, Texas A&M had said.
Valerie Hudson. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
and the subtitle, for a time, right? It's over. It's done. We don't need to be concerned again. And it was funny because I started to research, some of the multiple sources that say, of course, that's not the case. And I thought, you know what? I'll just throw it over to Bill and RFM. And here they've put together a really nice presentation, just exactly what we're talking about. A commandment for a time that is not accurate. So I'll let you guys take that.
All right. So, is there anything you want to say about that picture?
No, that was just my final picture to kind of look at what it actually means. I mean, we're talking about a lot of people impacted for generationally and didn't end in 1890. It went on and on.
All right. So the only thing I wanted to make a note of was the change in the subtitle, which we discussed already. Faith to obey a law from the Lord, even when it's hard, to a commandment for a time, a temporary commandment. And the only thing I wanted to note here was that RFM and I did a episode, Think Celestial Marriage before 1890. And I'll put up here on the screen, every time we do a historical episode, at least almost every time, we do a historical episode, I usually go into Reddit and I put all of my sources down and how RFM and I got from the beginning of the episode to the end, demonstrating clearly where the evidence leads you. So this is the Reddit post about that episode. And I'm just going to scroll down and just simply say, the church is trying in the here and now to make an argument that, number one, celestial marriage is not the new and everlasting covenant. It's actually, and then they try to change it so celestial marriage isn't polygamy, it's one man and one woman sealed for all of eternity. But when you go into the data, and there are tons of it, I'm not even a third of the way done through this yet. What you will see if you were to pause the screen and read through all of this stuff, or go into Reddit, all you have to do is look up the Reddit post in the Reddit forum ex-Mormon or Mormon, and it's titled Thinking Celestial, Proving Celestial Marriage. What you'll find if you read all the sources is that the early leadership clearly taught that celestial marriage and the new and everlasting covenant are polygamy. And not only are they polygamy, but that Jesus visited John Taylor in 1886 and clearly tells him that polygamy is never going to go away. It is here forever. He can't take it away. And so the church has completely changed on this issue because it wants to get as far away from polygamy as possible. And so the only thing I note there through all of that data is that this was not a temporary commandment. This was a restored doctrine that was supposed to exist until the church no longer existed. And this is just one more line item where the church claimed something in the early history, changed it, and then changed their theology around it so that people who were naive wouldn't ask any further questions.
And then they let the apologists come and bat cleanup for them and explain to everybody why the new and everlasting covenant is not marriage. It's actually everything kind of all put together in a bundle. It's all of it. It's not just, polygamy.
It's a one-stop shop. And I went on Chat GPT to see, I asked the question, is there polygamy in, LDS heaven? And it said no. And it gave a nice little paragraph. But then under that, it said yes. And it gave a nice little paragraph. And then it said there are conflicting opinions on this. So
No, there aren't.
Yeah, I know.
How could there be a conflicting opinion about it? Joseph Smith was married to more than one wife.
I don't know. You haven't talked to any monogamy affirmers lately then.
No, I'm not using that term. That doesn't exist for me.
It's a new term. I just learned it.
Those polygamy deniers, those PDs.
Anyway, that's all I have on that. I think we're done with that.
All right. Is the next one mine?
I think.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Please.
Yeah.
It is in Mormonism, if you accept what's told to you by the leaders or the apologists, they will cherry pick something. So for instance, the Book of Mormon says that, unless God commands otherwise, monogamy is the rule. And so the apologist gets to point to that and go, that solves it. Look at that. There's where our theology comes from. You can't ignore the dozen to 24 statements on the record from leaders of the church and their proclamations and revelations and the quotes that come out from them that clearly say something else. And so there's this game that gets played where apologists and leaders get to pretend by cherry picking one thing that was the only thing they had to pick from. And the reality is that Mormonism contradicts itself at every turn, literally every turn.
Yes. And by this point, no matter what position you have, you can find stuff that was said by Mormon authorities to support it.
Yep.
All right. Now let me see here. Is this what I'm putting up here on the stage? Is this mine? Yeah. There we go. There we go. This is the chants. This is the Anti-Mormon chants. CHANTS. Arizona. That's the Arizona. Is it University of Arizona? Help me out because I don't do sports. The guy who doesn't watch sports got the sports story this week. Don't ask me. Blame it on Perry White. Bill? I have Arizona. It's some school down there in the southwest of the United States. Apparently, they're good some of the time, and they've got a basketball team, and their colors are red, it looks like. Maybe red and white. Arizona apologizes for anti-Mormon chants after the team's loss to BYU. I didn't even know this happened, but apparently it happened last Saturday. ASU Sun Devils. Thank you so much, Shannon. The Cougars upset win came after controversial calls. That's true. I looked at it and I saw, yeah, this is a tight game. It's an important game. And wow, I'm sure it was very exciting for people who care about basketball. Around 98% of BYU students are Mormons. That's for all you people out there in Podunkville who have no idea that this is why this anti-Mormon chant might be chanted by ASU fans toward the BYU team. All right. And here we go. Arizona, it says have apologized. Arizona, I would say, has apologized after some of the team's fans directed abuse at BYU after the Cougars upset victory over the Wildcats on Saturday. The game in Arizona's home arena ended in controversy after a number of calls went BYU's way. As the players left the court, chants of the Mormons could be heard around the McHale Center. Around 98% of BYU student body are Mormons, and the university is sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay, so we got an issue here, and some people were not happy about it. I think this is a shot from the game. Following tonight's men's basketball game, it was brought to our attention that an unacceptable chant occurred. Arizona Athletic Director Desiree Reed-Francois said in a statement, on behalf of the University of Arizona Athletic Department, we apologize to BYU, their student athletes, coaches, and fans. The chant is not reflective of who we are and should not have happened. Period. End of statement. I always love it when they say the chant is not reflective of who we are. Obviously, it is reflective of at least some of who you are. Okay? Yes. And probably a lot more of you than you'd like to admit. The teams tussled after the end of the game. And Arizona coach Tommy Lloyd was critical of a call that led to free throws that sealed BYU's 96-95 win. See how close it was? But he said his team took responsibility for the defeat. I actually like this line in this story. I know just enough about sports to know this is the right attitude for a coach to have. It's a bad call. I mean, like, whatever. What am I going to say? Lloyd said. You hate for a game to be decided by that. And the guy who called it is one of the best refs, so we've got to live with it. But step back. They scored 93 points up to that point on our home court. That's the problem. And here's the chant. And I have the link. It goes to X. And here, by the way, it's not going to be right at the beginning, and it's not going to be super clear. But if you listen for F the Mormons, you might hear it. Could you hear anything there?
Just barely, maybe.
Barely, I know. It wasn't
but
a very
I
good
mean,
one.
I think since I was listening for it, that's why. But
I know, and even then, it was like where I thought I heard it was at the very end, and a couple of times.
That's where I thought I heard
steam or anything.
Some kind of rhythm. I'm still confused on whether they're upset because they said the F word or the M word. Do we know which one they're more upset about?
That's funny. That's funny, but not the first time apparently. So then we got an article from KSL that I dug up. Jake Retzloff shares thoughts on derogatory chant at BYU Arizona basketball game. He is apparently the quarterback for the BYU football team. He's not Mormon, he's Jewish. BYU football quarterback Jake Retzloff shared his opinion. Retzloff responded to a video shared by former BYU basketball star, blah, blah, blah. It's the one I think we just saw. The video featured a clip from a podcast interview. No, it isn't. Between Mika and Retzloff last fall discussing what chants Retzloff and the BYU football team have heard on road games. This is the first time. The clip comes less than 2 days after Arizona students chanted the Mormons following BYU basketball's 96-95 win. Jake Retzloff is on offensive chant. He says this can't be normalized. He's a member of the Jewish faith. He's witnessed the chants on the road in his 2 years as a BYU football player. And here's what he says. We get the FBYU chant, F the Mormons chant. That one is prominent around the country. F the Mormons, prominent around the country, which is bizarre to me, Retzloff said in a podcast interview with Eric Mika. Remember, he's Jewish. You take any other religion, even my religion. Could you imagine the uproar if that happened in the media? It would be nuts. But BYU does a good job of handling it, man, period, end of quote. And here's also where he says this can't be normalized. And he also says, crazy how an arena full of people think it's okay to do this. And there was another episode of this that I found, and I don't claim to have found them all. The Oregon Ducks, September 2022. Here's the chant that was going on there. And by the way, this is from some gal who was a Mormon who traveled across the country to be there, and she was sitting next to it. You're actually going to be able to see and hear this one.
Fuck the Mormons! Fuck the Mormons! Fuck.
Yeah, if my mascot were the Ducks, I would probably be angry too. And here's what this says. This is a little bit of an opinion piece, and I just want to read a few pieces of it. Mormons are used to turning the other cheek, but that's not ending bigotry. Too much good humor in the face of prejudice can unintentionally normalize objectionable behavior. It's by a guy named Hal Boyd. This is 2022. Hey, hey, Bill, could you read this first paragraph? And Rebecca, the second. Can you see it okay?
Yep. In an era of high-minded inclusivity, it's worth pausing to wonder how a crowd of people, strangers even, could feel comfortable chanting "Bleep the Mormons" in unison again and again over the course of a 3-hour sporting event. The fact that such circumstance has occurred not once, but twice at different Pac-12 college football stadiums in recent years raises yet another question. Why isn't more being done to stop it?
On Saturday, a college football fan who has been identified only as Aubrey traveled from the East Coast to Eugene, Oregon to watch her alma mater, Brigham Young University, face off against the Oregon Ducks. BYU lost 41-20, but it wasn't the scoreboard that soured Aubrey's experience. During the game, she said, the crowd nearby began chanting "F the Mormons" over and over. Well, she's never been to an MLS game then. My family's a huge MLS. They watch nonstop, and this chant happens all the time in the MLS. I don't know what the difference is. Oops, are you muted, RFM? Although when I think about it,
What is MLS?
The Major League Soccer.
Oh, that's why I didn't.
The only true sport, football.
That's why I did not know it.
MLS,
okay. Major League Soccer. I've never heard of that in my life.
Soccer kids, then you didn't travel or go out of the country. But most of these chants are with the team name or the ref. I think the problem here is that it's Mormon. It is a religion. That's the difference.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it problematic. I mean, obviously we've got mascots, right? It's Cougars there at BYU,
right?
And F the Cougars, objectionable. But not with the same connotations that F the Mormons, who are the religious group that owns it and attends there. It'd be like going F the Catholics, right, at Notre Dame. Right? Do they do that there?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see any articles about it, but then I didn't look for them specifically. University of Southern California, November of 2021. USC apologized for an anti-Mormon chant at a BYU game. The University of Southern California Athletic Department has issued an apology for offensive chants made by its student section during Saturday's football game against Brigham Young University. The offensive chant from our student section, this is quoting, directed toward BYU during the football game, last night does not align with our Trojan values. Yeah, right. The Trojans said in a statement on Sunday, it was distasteful and we apologize to the BYU program. Okay. So that's what they issued from their athletics department, November 28, 2021. According to the Salt Lake Tribune, the chant in question appeared to be F the Mormons, which multiple Twitter users confirmed. So this is something that happens. I'm guessing it happens all the time. By the way, I put this up here just because this was from 2021. Where we get this kind of benign sort of statement, oh, we're sorry, from USC. And it sure looks an awful lot like this benign statement from Arizona, ASU. Oh, we're sorry. Yeah, this isn't cutting it, guys. This isn't doing it. This is religious bigotry. And you need to take steps to knock it the F off. So I wanted to go back to this essay. Maybe the critic is right. This is a snippet, so I apologize. Everything isn't going to connect completely together. Maybe the critic is right, and Latter-day Saints really do suffer from the kind of acute cachet deficiencies that come when a culture is born and bred in flyover country. Wow, what great sentence, huh? Or perhaps a mixture of non-coastal niceness and a distinctly Latter-day Saint ability to smile even while doors slam on proselytizing missions plays a role. Regardless, after this most recent round of chants, It's time to ask. Remember, this is 2022. This is 3 years ago. Regardless, after this most recent round of chants, it's time to ask, as Coppin seems to, whether too much good humor in the face of vulgar entertainment and displays of public bigotry and a rash of church vandalism, including the attempted burning of a temple in July, can also unintentionally normalize or even enable that bigotry. The answer, if history has anything to say on the subject, is yes. Here's another picture. Football between BYU and the Ducks. There's, of course, a balance to strike in the case of the Oregon chants. There are wise reasons for the First Amendment's strong protections of speech, even deeply offensive speech in public places. And yet, if you can publicly chant F the Mormons with only minimal social consequences, i.e. none, it's time for Latter-day Saints to collectively push, as Aubrey, that girl who went across the country, sought to do, for greater and more immediate action, especially from school officials when animosity flares on campuses. Perhaps that's why the offensive chant wasn't stamped out the first time. And once again, this is 3 years ago. Even though the University of Southern California apologized after the episode last year. The reason I say it is apologize because they didn't do anything about it. As has Oregon this year, apologized, but didn't do anything about it. At least not that I heard, not that I saw in my research. Both schools should be applauded for publicly condemning these chants, and I don't doubt the sincerity of the apologies. But I also think it's reasonable to expect schools to do more. Universities should counsel fans and students about good sportsmanship. They should set public expectations and take measures to enforce them. They should send personnel into the crowd when necessary, and in extreme circumstances, remove offending fans. Yeah, and they should be, and if they're students, they should be suspended from class for a period of time too. They should hold fans and students, as well as staff members who act as amused bystanders, like Aubrey said a staffer did, to a reasonable standard of accountability. And I think that's pretty much the end of it, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's 30. That's the end of my story. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've been to a lot of BYU games over the decades, and I will say I have heard, not great things said, and I've seen not sportsmanlike behavior from some of the fans, home and away games. So
The Cougars?
The Cougars. Yeah,
Oh, what
I
did they
was,
say?
I went to BYU. I was there on campus for like 20 years.
Were
So
they saying F the Trojans?
no, it was nothing like that. But, and there have been things in the news where there have been racial slurs allegedly thrown out, fairly recently from BYU fans or players. So I don't know. I mean, none of it is appropriate.
I just want to say, I don't know. Believe me, I don't follow sports, so I don't know all of them. I know that I think it was like a year ago last summer that there was an incident that caused a huge flare up, but then it turned out there wasn't any evidence to support it. In fact, the evidence didn't show it when you would think it would have.
Right. That's
so
why
I don't know if that's the same one you're talking about. There
have been a couple little ones that you just wonder and you don't know, and you never really hear how they end exactly. But either way, it's not appropriate. I have heard some comments or read some comments where people from BYU or in the church have said sort of this is a kind of a cross that we bear sort of a thing. So they're used to persecution. Perhaps they expect persecution in that way. But again, not appropriate. They should not go after a religion, a team. That's kind of the way it is. Like I said, MLS, but a religion, no. And there's other things you could chant. Somebody said chant, SEC fine, or there's other things that could get a point across.
Good point. Bill, your thoughts? Hey, Bill.
Oh, muted.
All right. So I've been to a lot of sporting events over the course of my life. And at the professional level, you can't go to a game without hearing one team swearing and chants. And I mean, it just, the outfield razzing the outfielder, saying personal things about them or their family. It's sort of the nature of professional sports, but it doesn't feel appropriate. We're all there to sort of watch athletes put on an entertaining game, to give their best, hopefully, and to put on an entertaining game. Sometimes it's a blowout, sometimes it's close. I think also when you allow people to chant in these ways, it's only a hop, skip, and a jump to an elevated amount of violence. In other words, if people think they can get away with chanting those things, the group mentality, right? The idea that when you allow a group of people to do something, they will go further than if it's an individual doing something. There's a certain psychology in feeling like the other 10 guys around you are in with you on doing this horrible thing. And it wouldn't take much for other measures of violence to start to occur. So I'm just going to start my comment by saying that I'm not a fan of extreme language where children are present. I'm not a fan of violent rhetoric or violent actions at sporting events. Now, that said, here's my point. There's one quote that says, "This can't be normalized." Let me start off by saying to everyone within Mormonism, there's a hell of a lot of things in Mormonism that shouldn't be normalized. And then the final quote they said was, "Why isn't more being done to stop it?" Well, that's what I say to a lot of things inside the church. And so I just want people to note what things we decide we just can't allow. We can't allow people to say bad words towards a group of people at a basketball game, but there are lots of things we do allow that are way worse than that. And in this religion that we examine under a microscope, it does a lot of things and has done a lot of things that should. And why isn't there more being done to stop it? And so that goes both directions. That's it.
Oh, is it still me?
It's
I thought
you.
this was
Back
yours,
to you.
Rebecca.
Do we need to chant at you, RFM?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, because I'd already done the 30 on the end of my story, so I thought I was
Oh,
done.
Oh, you're like, done. All right. Next slide then.
Yeah,
It is
let's
me.
do it. Back to Rebecca. Here is that story. Sorry if I should have just transitioned to conducting the show again. So
We're all
My
staring
mistake.
at each other like, we
My
don't
mistake. It
rehearse
was my
this. We'll
fumble.
rehearse a little. Yeah, exactly.
There's the
This
ball
is a
on the
very sorry. Another LDS temple update time, Tut, right? We've been talking about temples almost every newscast, but something new happens every time. This will be fairly quick. Let me see if I can advance this. All right. The Bengaluru Indian Temple. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Do you guys have any other advice on how to pronounce that? I think it's Bengaluru. Do you think? Seems right.
That's what the temple's going to look like?
Yeah. Now look at that. What do you think about that?
I'm not an expert on Indian architecture, but I expect that it's made to kind of fit in there.
Mhm.
I'm guessing.
That's exactly it. And it is very large, but I will say, look around it. You've got skyscrapers, and we'll see some other pictures later. It definitely fits in with the environment, even though it is very large. So that's not what we're talking about, temple size here. So interestingly, I came across a post last week on this temple on a faithful subreddit where it said, looks like construction has been halted because of something to do with the government. Right. And they were all kind of guessing and talking what this might be. Somebody suggested Hindu nationalism, things like this. So I was curious. I didn't really know how to look into it too much farther. And then I came across a post on a post-Mormon Reddit site where somebody seemed to have some information. I checked with them to see if it was okay if I shared with everybody. And I think Generally Unquotable has talked about this too last week, but it's pretty interesting. So there's a site that kind of goes through updates on LDS temples. It's a church site. You can go there and see when it was announced, what the current status is. So back in November 3rd, 2024, it said about this Indian temple, structural framing for the temple and ancillary building is in place. Construction estimated to be completed in late 2026. That's pretty standard. You'll read that on almost every temple that's under construction. And then suddenly, this is why it's interesting and in the news, February 12th, 2025, it says on the church's site, construction delayed due to religious finance laws. Concrete structural frames in place for the temple and ancillary buildings, windows opening shuttered. No construction completion estimate available. So this is very different. It's halted due to religious finance laws, and there's no date that it may possibly be finished at all. So then the very next day, it was updated yet again, and you can kind of see this is how it kind of appears on that site. And they make changes in real time, apparently. And so the very next day, it says construction delayed due to not religious finance laws, but current finance laws. And then the rest of it is still in place. They've taken down the scaffolding. They've, no construction completion date is in sight. And I looked at it today just to see what it would say, because things change very quickly in the world of Mormonism. And today it said construction temporarily delayed. The concrete structural frames in place for temple and the buildings and the windows shuttered. No construction completion estimate available. But there's no mention of this delayed due to current finance laws or due to religious finance laws. And so this is what everybody was discussing over on the Faithful site. What does that mean? And I found what I think are some pretty good explanations from somebody who seems to have some information over here. So this is really interesting. This person says, as you can see, I have provided some screenshots, what we just saw of the temple website. The keywords here are religious finance being changed to current finance. This clearly indicates that the official reason provided by the Indian government, and they're going to, let's see, was not a primarily religious decision, but a legal one. To help cross-verify, I archived all 3 web pages on the Wayback Machine. So this person is very thorough, and this person also understands that things disappear like this. So you have to definitely archive it. So now let's understand that the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, known as the FCRA of 2010, it is a subset of the Ministry of Home Affairs, which in India is responsible for domestic policy and public security. The FCRA is essentially a license given to foreign corporations that allow them to channel money into the country for the purpose of humanitarian development. In 2016, the LDS registered under the FCRA, even has their number, even has their record here in this picture. The licenses are valid for 5 years and have to be renewed 6 months before they expire. So the church had this license. They were allowed to funnel money for humanitarian purposes or building a temple into the country 5 years ago. So here it is, 5 years later, right? As of January 2025, construction was well underway. However, just 2 weeks later, what has changed? Here's a quote by the director of the FCRA on November 8th, 2024. If any field agency has reported adverse inputs against the NGO and its acceptance of foreign funding is likely to affect social religious harmony or is involved in induced forceful religious conversion or proselyting, or its office bearers have linkage with radical organizations, the organization will also face action under the FCRA. So legally, there has been no action taken against the LDS organization. And this person here shows that their license is still there, but it is up for renewal. And that, I think, is the question. Here are some pictures. You can see on the left what it looks like now. It doesn't look like it's under construction anymore. All evidence of construction is gone. Just a few weeks ago, the middle frame, that is what it looked like. It was well underway. They were working on it. And you can see where it sits there in the middle of, town with other buildings that are tall. So this person suggests, so what happened? Here is my most likely guess. Their license renewal was denied. This is just a poster's opinion here. An FCRA release date of December 27, 2024 states that if the corporation's renewed request was not approved, yet funding will be blocked. This corroborates with the current finance problem stated on the Church of Jesus Christ Temple website. Now, what does this mean for the LDS Church? These licenses have been denied before. This often leads to long legal battles, which can stretch for years. Now, all we can really do is wait until March 31st of this year, about a month from now, to find out whether the church's renewal appeal was processed or not. Until then, they're stuck without a license, and there's still a chance that the construction activity will resume. The real estate sector this person said there might be some diciness to the real estate sector. So who knows if they can find a workaround. If they find somebody that will kind of have a workaround, then there's always an opportunity to go under the table. To conclude, as of right now, it's uncertain whether construction will resume, depending on how the next few weeks pan out. The LDS will have a lot to justify in court if they decide to take the legal route, so we can only wait and see. So kind of interesting. It just shows how in other countries, they're pretty much at the mercy of that legal system, where, as we report on and see here in the US, there seems to be a lot more wiggle room, and they seem to be able to do a lot more. Any thoughts on this interesting temple in India, which is just on hold right now?
There were about 5 people in the live chat who appear to know the Indian language, or Punjabi, or whatever.
Interesting.
Hindi. I'm not sure exactly which one they're using here, but they were saying it's Bengaluru.
Bengaluru. Oh, that's so pretty. Oh, I love that. Much better. Bengaluru.
Do you know the song, Rebecca?
The song?
Bengaluru.
That is not how that is not Luralurale. That is not Bengaluru. Tuluralurale. Yes, that is that song.
You don't know that song.
I do know that song, but I don't think it's Bengaluru. Anyway,
Okay.
beautiful. Thank you to those in the chat that pointed that out. So, any other thoughts on the legalities around this temple? Interesting.
Oh, I'm
No.
sorry, Bill, you're shaking your head?
Yeah,
I
he
don't
was
have
shaking his
else
head. He
to
has
add.
no thoughts, no
You guys-
comments.
Not really. What are you seeing in this? Are you seeing some perfidy?
I'm just seeing that it's interesting to track temple building in other countries as opposed to the United States. There's a big difference, and this will be really
Yes.
interesting to see what happens.
And different people you have to please and different
Uh-huh.
votes to obtain by whatever means that you
Yeah.
have to obtain them.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's why they hire lawyers who are Indian and know the law, right? Over there.
Yep, absolutely. So hopefully they can build it. I mean, it would be the only temple in India. It's the first one. So LDS temple, I should say. There are many, many temples in India. Okay.
Really, this would be the first temple in India, huh?
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
So that's kind of a big deal.
It is kind of a big deal. I know. And that's why people are wondering, where is it? What's going to happen? So we'll follow it. We'll report back. Very quickly, another
But
update.
we don't have proselyting missionaries there.
I don't believe we do have
I don't think
proselyting
so.
missionaries there, unless there's some kind of little wiggle workaround, because as
Well,
I
it sounds
understand
like
it,
from what one of those
Yeah.
things that was said by your source, that's one of the things the government there is concerned
Yeah.
about, a little wiggle workaround to have those
Yep.
kinds of sort of coercive conversions.
Yep, aggressive proselyting. So they probably
Aggressive
have,
proselyting, yes.
yes, they'd probably have to go in as teachers. I know in many countries, missionaries are teachers, on their visa. So
Don't you
Good luck.
think that baptizing the dead folks in India is aggressive proselytizing?
exactly.
It seems like work for the dead is pretty aggressive.
It is pretty aggressive if people really understand what it means. Absolutely. I mean, nobody is immune, right? You can't stop them. Even you're not safe. Anything can happen. So, all right. News out of Lone Mountain, Las Vegas area. A citizens group had rallied. They were trying to challenge the LDS decision. And unfortunately, that has been dismissed. Court complaint challenging LDS temple near Lone Mountain dismissed. We're not going to get into the whole long saga. Again, I have a playlist on Mormonish if you want to follow this. But this was the temple where the city council was pretty on board for various reasons. And a district court judge dismissed a case that challenged the approval of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple being built in Northwest Las Vegas. The group, of course, alleged that the city completely ignored the law, misapplied the law, and made factual decisions that were not in any way, shape, or form supported by substantial evidence. It's kind of a deja vu. So in this case, it looks like they have the total go-ahead to build. This is Lone Mountain. This is a ginormous temple. This is huge, much bigger than the McKinney original one we're talking about, certainly much bigger than Cody. This is huge. And if you look at this picture, Lone Mountain is called Lone Mountain because they have this gorgeous Lone Mountain, right? And now
Would it just be
forevermore.
sort of to the left in that picture, but sort of cut off?
Uh-huh.
Is that where the mountain would be?
Yeah, it's this beautiful mountain that's just there against the natural skyline, and it's just beautiful. And I don't know, I don't want to be suspicious, but I feel it's almost like anytime the church sees a gorgeous natural landscape and skyline, they want to get their thumbprint in there and put up a billboard. I give you this example. This is Red Cliffs, and sure, the mountains are much bigger than the temple, but look at that. When you go down there to St. George area, this is all you see. Your eye can't pan the panoramic view, right? Without being halted with a screech right in the middle. What is that? It's the temple. So anyway, temple construction will begin soon. And it looks like
that's the Mormon temple record scratch effect.
It is the Mormon temple record scratching effect. And it's real. I think people in the chat can back me up. You're like looking and then you're like, what's that? Especially when it's lit up at night. So anyway, yeah, that's the story for Lone Mountain. We've been following that for over a year, and that's where it stands now. So a funny meme, I thought, out of Fairview right here. It's a picture of a Quick Quack car wash. And usually they're bright yellow, right? They really stand out. That's their signature. But here in Fairview, they have different codes. They have different regulations. And Quick Quack has built this car wash on the right, which is a lovely shade of gray. It's,
So I
Very
just read the last
muted.
part at the bottom.
Exactly. And it says, when Quick Quack Car Wash is more respectful for the community than the LDS Church in Fairview, Texas. And somebody made the joke, yellow in the design is intended to help patrons focus on the car wash experience, said no one ever. So the person is just pointing out there are corporations that get the idea. You work with the towns, you build something that is going to be a win-win for everybody, like this
Can I
car
ask
wash.
I'm sorry. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The Quick Quack on which one is supposed to be in Fairview?
The one that was built in Fairview is on the right. They didn't use the
That's
bright.
not Texas.
That's not Texas?
Look at the mountains and the snow.
Oh, well, you're right. That isn't Texas. I think that's the example of what it's going to look like. So,
Yeah, it's a little bit more maybe intricate than I thought at first.
yeah. You know what? I didn't even pick up on that. So it is possible that the entire meme is a facetious meme. But I will say that corporations usually do work with towns. When I was involved in the city planning in my city 10 years ago, or probably 15, they were putting in a Walmart. And my city had very specific codes, kind of like this car wash. You had to have like a brick facade. The Walmart couldn't have a bright blue sign like it normally does. And they worked back and forth with the city tirelessly to arrive at something that would be approved. And now it's a beloved Walmart in the town. So it does happen.
So,
but you're right, RFM.
Apparently the idea is that the Quick Quack Car Wash is somewhere that has beautiful mountains and snow that looks like it could be Utah, but doesn't have to be. But definitely not Fairview, Texas.
Yeah.
That there were codes and city codes there
Right.
in that place with the mountains that they
Right.
followed. But yeah, it's
And
not
they'll work
not quite as neat as it might otherwise be. But what the heck?
No, but you know what? I'd rather be authentic than, and say, you're right, there are mountains there. But I think the idea is that a lot of corporations do work with cities, even if it means sort of changing their branding just a little bit so that you can fit in and be a good neighbor, right?
Well, so that you can build your structure.
So you can build your structure and be a good neighbor, a win-win for everybody. So anyway, all right. Very quick update here on Cody. This is looking out the window. If you live next to the temple at 1 a.m., this is what you would see. This is construction and lights on a construction site, which, construction sites have lights, of course. This is a view of the Cody, Wyoming LDS Temple at 1 a.m. from a neighbor's window. The LDS Church, this is interesting, is applying to rezone the area around the temple to residential 2, which will allow more options to build multifamily housing right next to the temple.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Can I just say that this would be evidence that the church does make money off of the housing around the temple?
Yep.
If you're building a temple in some place and you just want your, the Mormon residents in the town to be able to have access to it, no big deal. When you gain financial benefit by having people live next door to the temple, you want the area around the temple to accommodate residential areas and residential housing. Why would the LDS Church be fighting for this if it has nothing to do with the housing development that happens around every temple? And I'll just note, almost every temple is built in an empty space where housing developments go in around the same time or shortly thereafter.
Sometimes I've heard that the land in its entirety is donated by a wealthy Mormon to build the temple lawn. So the church gets the land for free. And then the quo for that quid is that then they get to, the person who donated the land, right, now gets to use the other land for building homes for wealthy Mormons who want to have a view of the temple in their backyard.
Yeah, it's definitely to their benefit, like the Urda Temple, which was in Tooele, and then it moved over to, or it was not in Urda. Where is it now? I can't remember. Anyway, it moved.
I think it's in Turda.
Turda, that must be it.
Yes.
I'm getting all my temples mixed up. I
Went
did a
from
whole
Urda
freaking
to Turda,
episode on it.
like that.
Anyway, yes, a developer donated the land and was already building, this infrastructure. So now those houses are worth a lot more. The Red Cliffs Temple, that's exactly it. I was down there for the open house last year in conjunction with Thrive. Yes, I went to Thrive in the morning and an LDS Temple open house in the afternoon. It was quite the juxtaposition. But again, here's
You're
the
a juggernaut.
That's it. Here's the temple and all around it, brand new cul-de-sacs, brand new infrastructure. But what's interesting about this is that the church seems to be moving toward these multi-family housing developments, rentals. It used to be pay off your house, right? Wasn't that advice everybody got in the 70s? Now they're building all these kinds of rental units, so, and even buying up smaller houses like starter homes for rental purposes. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it would be interesting if that was something. We talked last week about the whole town Cody and the town council and the planning and zoning and the city planner. If this was always in the works, changing the zones, changing the codes for this multi, apartments, whatever they're going to build, townhouses. So we'll see. But that's in the works right now with Cody. I think I have one more slide. Yes, our friend Martine, our good friend who scours the news like we do, pointed out this is right here in my area. They have just released a rendering of what the new Lehi, Utah temple is going to look like. This is going to be 88,000 square feet. This is, I think, less than 5 miles from the Mount Timpanogos temple, which is the temple in my area. So there it is. It's very large, and I'm going to drive past it probably every day on my way to work. So when it's built.
The Mormon population must really be booming there in Utah.
Well, anecdotally, I'm not exactly sure. I've gone on that site called Why I Left, and there are smiley faces everywhere in that area. So we'll see. Anyway,
how many active Mormons does one need to support a temple? I know the temples are of different sizes and they have different numbers of rooms, but still,
it's a good
it looks like we're past the small temple phase of Gordon B. Hinckley.
Yeah, no, these are monster temples, mega temples. These are huge. And I do know that they borrow temple workers from other temples. They'll get the call, we need more people over here. So they're just kind of shuffling everybody around. I know that they encourage younger people to work in the temple, people right off their mission, service missionaries, young couples. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting that we're back to building monstrosities of temples, and the small ones have sort of gone by the wayside. So that is intriguing. Especially with membership sort of going down, at least in some areas, you would think that the small temple would still be highly utilized. You can't proselyte in India, for instance. It's going to be hard to imagine how the church grows significantly there. But anyway, well, thank you, Rebecca. All right, so the last story here is mine. It's the Tolerance Award. By the way, if you go and Google, and by the way, I thought about how I wanted to contextualize this news story based on the polygamy story that you started off with, the polygamy cartoon, Rebecca. And so some of that will play out here. The Tolerance Award, if you go and look on Google or Bing or your favorite search engine, type in Award of Tolerance, David Bednar, you won't get any results. This thing is sort of unknown to anyone. I'll just note, here's a picture of Elder Bednar accepting the award. And I have some things to say about the entity that did this. RFM, do you have something?
Is that award in the shape of is that a Roadrunner?
It sort of looks like the Roadrunner,
doesn't
it?
Oh, maybe a dove. Oh, of course. I'm sure it's supposed to be a dove. Not a Roadrunner.
It looks more like a Roadrunner than a dove.
Well, that would make Elder Bednar the coyote.
Yeah. That thing's trying to run as fast as it can away, huh? So the
Church Funny Award.
the church newsroom put out a notice that this had happened. I don't think any of us would have learned this if the church wasn't bragging about it. The two paragraphs that I think are important are the ones that I've got the red boxes around. So this was I want to try to get the name of this is the Second International Dialogue of Civilizations and Tolerance Conference. And the entity that puts this on, I'm going to skip ahead for just a moment. You'll see in the little blue circle there on the image on the left, it's Trends, Trends. That's the name of the entity. We'll talk about them here in a second. Elder Bednar said, I'm privileged to be here today to address the theme of empowering youth for a tolerant future, said Elder Bednar to the Assembly of International Attendees. Our church focuses on helping young people to learn, to act, to serve, and to become, said the apostle.
So let me see if I've got this right. Elder, don't stand up before me, receives a tolerance award. Is that right?
Yeah, the church gets the award. Elder Bednar was given the assignment of accepting the award on behalf of the church. It is a strange thing to pick him. He seems like one of the least tolerant apostles among the 15. And that with Elder Oaks in the 15, that's saying something. It seems like a good move would have been to send either like Dieter Uchtdorf or Patrick Huron, who I think is much more visibly inclusive and accepting and tolerant. at least from what we see of these folks.
Or maybe Aaron Sharinian. They could
Aaron
bring him
Sharinian.
out of the closet, out of dust or what, mothballs,
Yep.
Yeah.
and dust
Only
him
he
off and
would.
send him over there.
Yeah. So then the last paragraph, in addition to being being a keynote speaker, Elder Bednar received the Award of Tolerance on behalf of the church during the opening. I know, RFM.
Can you
During the
imagine
opening
having a
ceremony.
general conference address as your keynote speaker and everybody's going,
Yeah. He said he believes the IDCT conference recognized that we as a church are trying to do what President Nelson has taught, said Elder Bednar. We are trying to be peacemakers, and we are trying to promote civility. So I'll just note the organization actually seems like it really does have an altruistic agenda to promote positive things. This is only the second annual award ceremony. It is a lot of Islamic folks who are part of the organization, but and I say because I think all of us tend to, when we see a large representation from the Islamic religion, a lot of times we immediately go to things like terrorism and sort of unhealthy ways to manipulate the world into things. But this really seems like a really healthy.
well, they did give the Tolerance Award to Elder Bednar.
They did, and I want to talk about that for a minute.
That's an act of terrorism right there, I think.
I agree, but I want to talk about it for a minute because I want to set this up so that folks recognize that I think the Trends group is actually really good. I was thinking maybe I would find something sort of scandalous about them and how they work throughout the world. Not true at all. They're doing a lot of good work in the world. Here is just two of their recent conferences: the role of religions in promoting global peace. The other one there, the role of religious tolerance and peaceful coexistence in the global age. They are a highly involved organization in trying to promote these really good ideals and seem really designed to bring benefit into the world.
So this is the second time they've had this award, and it already goes to Bednar. I mean, there wasn't anybody else out there, like hundreds and thousands of people before you get to Bednar.
Yeah, this reminded me, I don't have a picture here, but this reminded me of Elder Nelson, President Nelson winning the Peace Award.
Yes.
Recently. And there was no buzz about that either. And
you couldn't even find it on their website.
No, the award, there was an award that had a similar name. That award died. And then this award started for President Nelson, not this Bednar one.
Yeah, it had Martin Luther King. It had three names in it of famous peace.
Gandhi was in it. Yeah, the Gandhi, Martin Luther King,
and the South Africa.
Nelson Mandela. That was it. It was the
Mandela.
Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Martin. Yeah.
And it just seems like sort of a made up entity, made up award. And I've never seen anything else about it. And then Nelson wins, like in the first year this award starts getting handed out again. Wow. So there's a part of me that wonders how people get in line to get these things.
I don't know. And I'd hate to think that any money changes hands.
Yeah. Who knows? And some entities have more money than others, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about
you can buy your own peace prizes.
Yeah, you can. They can be purchased. I thought, how are the ways to interpret this? Because
by the way, I got to say something. I don't mean by saying that to say that peace prize that was given to President Nelson was bought by him. Okay.
But you aren't saying it wasn't either.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, look, here's the deal. And I've talked about this before. I'll do it really quick. Okay. If you're in any kind of a profession, like if law, right? I suddenly got, as a lawyer, I've been practicing for a number of years. I start getting solicitations from people who will either print my name in a book of the world's best and most wonderful lawyers and the most handsome lawyers. And all you have to do is pay them $250 for your copy. Okay. And if you get enough schmoes who are going to do that, yeah, they'll put the book together and you pay them $250. Yeah. And your name will be in there. Wow. Because the book is published based upon the contribution, not on how good a lawyer you are. Same thing for plaques you can put up on your wall, all these kinds of things. There are others that are legitimate. Okay. But not this whole other host of things. So all I'm saying is, I doubt that kind of system is exclusively found within the legal profession. It's probably out there in other places as well.
Yeah, and I'll put it up here on the screen. I went and found it while you were saying that. So the President Nelson to receive the Gandhi King Mandela Peace Prize from Morehouse College, and you can go do the research yourself. Morehouse College
Mhm.
wasn't giving this award out until this moment they did it. And there used to be an award that was just like the Gandhi Martin Luther King Award that was given out years ago, but
Yeah.
they stopped giving it out. And so it's almost like they made this award to sound like the award that had died off, but without, I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that. It
What was the
sort
date of that? Can you read that?
Yeah, March 15th, 2023.
So who did they give it to in 24? Do you know?
I have no idea. I haven't heard anything
That's
about
the
it. I'll look
question.
it up.
It was a one-off.
Just a question, you know,
Yeah, we'll
I
see
don't know
who
if it's
wins this.
annual.
We'll follow up.
or if it's every, 5 years or 10 or.
Yeah. Whenever enough money comes in to cover it, trophies aren't cheap these days. All right. So I thought there's 3 ways that my rational mind said I could interpret this. Maybe there's other things. To the audience out there, please put in what you think could be happening. But I'm just going to grant that I think this Trends organization who's running this award ceremony is legit and they're trying to do good in the world. So I think, number 1, the LDS Church really does stand at the forefront of tolerance and inclusivity, making a real difference in the world. And then I thought, well, that seems blatantly problematic, because I thought not only do we have the transgender policy there on the right, where transgender individuals are treated as sexual abusers in an LDS context. So that's not very inclusive. Then you've got all the quotes on race that the church has made over the years. That's not very tolerant. The church has never really apologized for that. I thought the 2015 new policy on gay couples and their children, that wasn't very tolerant. You've got L. Whitney Clayton, and of course, D. Todd Christofferson also reiterated this message, but that we should disconnect immediately and completely from listening to proselytizing efforts of those who have lost their faith. Now, notice, by the way, Mormons want to send their kids out door to door to offer a message to people. But when you leave the church and you want to offer the message back, that tolerance doesn't go both directions. So that wasn't very tolerant. So I don't think that's it. Oh, well, there's Mormon land. Booting women leaders off the stand was hurtful and heartbreaking. So I don't think number 1 is the correct interpretation. So then I moved on to number 2. The church does an incredible job of doublespeak, representing itself one way to the world and leaders of organizations it works with, and another message and behavior to those on the margins of its faith and the treatment of its members and those who criticize it or leave it. And I want to note the NAACP. Hence, this Trends organization got fooled. And I think there's evidence for this. The NAACP working with the church, thinking the church has made progress, but because they're outsiders looking at Mormonism from an outside lens, they don't have a way to sort of grasp the history of Mormonism with people of color. They don't know that the church did it the way they did it, didn't apologize for it, didn't even really apologize in any way on the front end, didn't do anything until 2013 outside of a Bruce R. McConkie talk at BYU. They don't apologize or disavow anything until 2013. Oak still claims that the ban itself is from God, and the NAACP is either fooled or bought, either way, fooled into thinking that that the LDS Church has somehow really made amends on this issue. And they haven't. You can ask any Mormon or ex-Mormon who knows the history, and they could clearly explain to the NAACP how they got fooled. You get this guy who said, "How grateful I am that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has from its beginnings stood strongly against racism in any of its malignant manifestations." This is the kind of stuff the NAACP is feeding off of.
The malignant manifestations are not withholding priesthood and temple ordinances to be with your family forever. Obviously, that's a benign manifestation of racism.
Or allowing Manning James to be sealed as a servant, or Marky Peterson saying that people of color can get into the celestial kingdom, but they'll be servants there, aka slaves, essentially. Or all the other rhetoric from 1948 and 1946 and 1940, all of it. So there's that. Then I thought, the church's double standard around being the gold standard on child abuse. Here is the church's website still claims to this day that the church's approach is the gold standard when it comes to abuse. When RFM, you and I, in an episode either last week or the week before, sat down with 21st century saints, and over the course of that show, we could easily come up with 6 to 10 recommendations that could be easily implemented that would protect children much better than the church currently does. Or the double speak around every doctrine in the church. So up on the screen is what the church says in one place, and then what it says in another around about a dozen doctrines. Here's another instance. External verbiage, internal verbiage, double speak about every one of these doctrines in LDS theology. You get whether you get a planet or you don't get a planet, double speak. So I thought number 2 probably has the best chance of being true. I think the third one, though, should be at least considered, that this trends entity whose mission seems to be to do real good in the world. One of the ways you can do that is you could see yourself as reaching your goal by nudging unhealthy faiths when those unhealthy faiths do something good. Like, hey, maybe if they get enough praise for the good things they do, they'll stop being so crappy somewhere else. And the thought I had with that is this would also give that unhealthy faith the arrogance to perceive itself as succeeding at carrying out its double message. Now we're back to number 2. And I just want to note other entities that do similar things. So Scientology, here's their bragging. Again, no one would know about this award except for the 10 guys on the stage and the 150 people in attendance.
Can I say one thing? I
church
apologize,
meetings.
Bill. I
Yeah,
did look
please.
it up, and I wanted to correct the record, make sure it was clear that apparently the second annual Gandhi King Mandela Peace Prize from Morehouse College was awarded to Reverend Dr. Gary Dorian.
I'd have to know more about Dr. Gary Dorian to make sense of this story, because I now need to know what crappy things he's done to deserve this.
Well, he's got a painting in the closet you got to take a gander at.
Dang it. I was just going to make that joke.
Sorry.
We think alike.
All right. So Scientology brags all the time about the awards that it gets. 349 laws to protect against human rights abuse. Remember, in this country, no one would have known Elder Bednar and the church won the award without the church telling everybody they did.
Oh, wait a second. Okay, so this is for the Scientology, and they're bragging about all the cool stuff they do, like the Mormon does about themselves. And this is why it says bringing psychiatry under the law, because they think psychiatry is bad and wrong-headed, and that we can. Well, I don't know the religion, but I think I heard Tom Cruise getting kind of exercised about that once on a talk show.
Yeah, they're very
Yes.
anti-psychology.
Yeah.
Scientology fights for laws protecting citizens against human rights abuse at the hands of psychiatry. That's one of the big endeavors they do. 41 million hours of volunteer minister help. If you didn't know better, you would think this was the Mormon Helping Hands shirts.
And I did when I was going
They're
through the
not.
slides this afternoon or this morning when I got to this, and I said,
Or not.
I'm looking and I'm thinking, wow, helping. Are those hands? Wait,
No, those are
they have a new
crosses.
design? Wait a second. This is the Scientologists. They're doing
Yeah.
the same thing. Now, I want to know who ripped off who.
That's a great question.
Yellow shirts.
I think the shirts the Scientologists did first. I think shirts are fairly recent for the LDS, last couple decades.
And I'll just note, if you're a believer in Mormonism and you get really excited about the cool things your church is accomplishing, I just want you to notice that other high demand fundamentalist religions also brag about the things they're accomplishing.
Mhm.
Here's another bunch of those Scientology Helping Hands shirts, helping hard hit Florida. 350 million global salvage materials distributed, whatever that means.
What is that? Yeah, what is a global salvage material singular?
I don't know. It's plastic straws for the turtles or something. I don't know.
It looks like they're reading something. It's like it's reading materials or something. See,
Yeah.
reading. It's probably all about Tom Cruise and John Travolta.
Yeah. 45,055 humanitarian partnerships. Look at all the awards they've got. Look at all these. This is crazy how well Scientology is doing in the world. Your triumph marks a global precedent for human rights and injustice. By the way, UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So even respected individuals within government at times are acknowledging the good that a high demand fundamentalist religion does. So having somebody give you an award doesn't make it necessarily that you're the greatest thing on earth. President Putin gives parenting award to the Jehovah's Witnesses,
Are the Jehovah's Witnesses just abnormally tall?
No, or someone else is abnormally short and has short man syndrome. It could be. I don't know.
It almost looks like it's, photoshopped in there, but
He's about as tall as the 11-year-old there. So
he looks like he's their college student.
yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses receive an award for protecting the environment. Look at this. This is another award to the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then I'll just note here on number 4, make decisions based on ethics and morality rather than self-preservation. This isn't one of the 3 interpretations. This was something I just wrote to sort of note. Did somebody add this?
I didn't. Did you add
No,
that, Rebecca?
I have some Easter stuff at the very end that I added at 10 o'clock this morning.
It was
Yeah,
you.
I should have one more slide. And if I don't
I
see
didn't
it
see any
here,
other slides.
let me go back.
You did put some at the end of my cartoon series. That's why I was asking you.
Yeah,
before.
no, this is something different. Let me just note that if an entity really was going to receive an award for tolerance and receive it based on their actual merit of what they do and how they show up in the world, it would include being tolerant of others, would include being kind to those who no longer believe your message. It would be being kind to those who don't fit in the box, this rigid box you've created about what is a worthy Mormon and what isn't. It would have to involve some degree of higher honesty and transparency. If you're going to be someone who's tolerant of others and win awards for it, you really should be doing lots of good behaviors in the world in such a way that you really could be seen as being tolerant. And Mormonism is full of so much intolerance. It's hard for me to figure out how the LDS Church, among all the millions of organizations in the world, won an award for the very thing that they might be the worst at.
Maybe it's a participation trophy.
In today's age, it very well could be.
Yep, given by a soccer mom. Absolutely. Well, I think of your list of 3, I think number 2 is more likely because I think a lot of things you describe that tell us what the true character is of the church, it's all inside baseball. It's really hard to understand. I think of the legislation, which is, protecting and supporting LGBTQ, right? Where you really read it and it protects and supports the church's right to discriminate against them. But a lot of people don't see that in there. So that's kind of what I think. Number 2, I think is right.
Yeah. Let me just say one last thing. So I see what I did now. This is the real signs of growth and accountability. Transparency, no more hidden history, no more doublespeak. Mean what you say what you mean. Number 2, acknowledge specific mistakes and make amends for those mistakes in a way that members can clearly see. Number 3, help members to clearly understand when leaders were wrong so members can more easily make decisions between inspiration and falsely held ideas. And number 4, make decisions based on ethics and morality rather than self-preservation. And if you really want to be tolerant, you have to get sort of these really good behaviors ingrained into how you operate day to day. And Mormonism is probably at least another 200 years from being able to, even on a mediocre level, be able to claim that they're somewhere along these lines. All right, Rebecca, let's wrap up with some Easter messages.
Who took that photograph, by the way, of Elder Oaks? Because I know that this was on the thumbnail of his message, He is Risen.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a miracle if he got out of that chair. There's something about that chair and its proportions to his body and the foreshortening of his legs that strikes me as odd.
Yeah, I didn't even want to go there because I got so much pushback when I revealed the red chair and President Nelson 2 years ago. So, but yeah, I think it looks really strange too. And in the background, it's hard to tell, but that is a Christus, a picture of Christ, and yellow or white drapery and everything. Yeah,
I'm glad someone is standing in the picture that's titled He is Risen.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, interestingly, President Oaks gave the Easter message this year, and Nemo just put out a little short today. I think it was just today, where he said he called himself kind of a Kremlin watcher, a church watcher, and said, what does this mean as far as President Nelson not giving this address, but President Oaks did? So anyway, it was very interesting. And again, the whole point of the message was, let's just start adopting these Easter traditions from other cultures, other faiths. What's wrong with you all that you haven't done this yet? Easter should be bigger and better than Christmas. Let's get with it. Why have you guys not done this before? And this just bugs the heck out of me, having been raised in the church, right? Having been raised in an era where if I said to my mom, oh, my friend is doing something on Good Friday, we don't talk about that. We don't do that. That's Christian, right? So I had to see if I was the only one. I put a post out on social media with the picture you see with the cross there. This is Elder Stevenson from conference 2 years ago, where he said, I observe a growing effort among Latter-day Saints toward a more Christ-centered Easter. This includes a greater and more thoughtful recognition of Palm Sunday and Good Friday as practiced by some of our Christian cousins. We might also adopt appropriate Christ-centered Easter traditions found in the cultures and practices of countries worldwide. Well, why does he observe a growing effort? Because you're telling us to do it from the pulpit. Nobody would ever consider doing that. It was absolutely forbidden. Were either of you raised that way?
Well, not in terms of raised, because I didn't
That's
join
right.
the church. I was
You
18, I
joined
think.
later. Right.
Yeah, 19, but no, we only did the worship service that
Mhm.
was countenanced by the LDS Church,
Yep.
which meant basically nothing. It meant Easter. When Easter Sunday rolls around, you've already gone through everything else, right? Even beginning with Mardi Gras and then Lent and everything, and then Easter. And the whole Holy Week has already gone past, and you go to church, and it's going to be Easter, right? And you're hoping you're going to be in the afternoon so you can have the Easter with the Easter egg hunt in the morning, if you're even going to do that, as a good Mormon. But you do that, and then you go to church, and you have a talk about Jesus, and probably the kids are going to get up there and maybe sing some kind of primary cantata about just little songs about Jesus, and grown-ups up there helping them read lines to connect the songs together. And that's Easter for Mormons, I think.
Yeah,
That's
even
been my
that.
experience.
Yeah, even that is beyond what I think a lot of people experience, where it's a regular sacrament meeting with just a few, maybe, reading of 3rd Nephi. But yeah, it confirmed how I was raised on social media. There were hundreds of comments of people saying, nope, not only did we not engage in any of these things during Holy Week, but we were told, you don't do that. And that's what I was told. I mean, it wasn't just we don't do it. It was, this is forbidden for a Mormon to do, the cross. And the idea behind it was always, we understand more than anyone else that it's about, the resurrection, not the death. We don't celebrate the death,
Right.
Meaning that Easter, at least that Holy Week prior to the resurrection, celebrated the death. So it's very interesting to watch them pivot now. And I just thought it's funny because, they keep mentioning Holy Week over and over again. And I know there are lots of things on the church website telling you what you can do for Holy Week, but there is still this on the church's website that says, Latter-day Saints conduct Easter Sunday services, but do not follow the religious observances of Ash Wednesday, Lent, or Holy Week.
Oh,
And
no.
I added this. Holy Week is the week of devotion in Christian churches that leads up to Easter, Palm Sunday, Maundy,
Right.
Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday. So the church says we do not celebrate Holy Week. That's Palm
Elder Oaks
Sunday
is an
and Good
apostasy.
Friday. That I
He's
can't
an
understand. I
apostasy
want
from the
everybody
church
to watch
website.
this. I feel like it's going to disappear really quickly. We're always
He's
watching
the Antichrist. He's rising to power.
something. And then it goes on to just say services traditionally review the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, a few hymns. You can have some lilies, exactly what you described. But it flat out says we don't do these other things that they are mentioning by name in their talks. They are talking about Good Friday, Palm Sunday. They're talking about Holy Week. So I just find this very interesting. So of course we did this last year. I remember I went again to see what's available from Deseret Book, what's available from LDS sources on Etsy, all kinds of things. Holy Week.
The
I mean,
resurrection taco.
yeah, those words would never have crossed my parents' lips when they were raising me. Holy Week. That would never have been said. And I never would have said that in teaching my kids about Easter. So all kinds of activities. There's the empty tomb necklace. They still can't quite bring themselves to sell the cross, but they have this empty tomb up here on the right.
That's when you got to make a run for the border.
That's exactly right. The Taco Bell. I did make that meme, didn't I? Where I put
Yes,
a
you
taco in
did.
it. I apologize. That was horrible. I'm
The
much more
resurrection taco. It was
sensitive. Yeah,
great.
it does look like a taco.
You think he comes out of the tomb 3 months later and he doesn't have a hankering for, some Mexican food?
It could be. I
It's
don't know.
only
Anyway,
natural.
no cross, but an empty tomb. You have Jasmine over on Scripture Central. She's put out several of these. What is Holy Week? How do we celebrate? We've always celebrated it, right?
Oh
That
my
kind of thing.
gosh.
Books, cutouts, coloring pages, all of it, all about Holy Week, which I think maybe 3 years ago is when they started doing this.
Yes.
Where from the pulpit said, this should be as big as Christmas. What's wrong with you? Why
Can I
haven't you?
just ask you,
Yeah.
It's okay, even though it fits under the absolute definition of the apostasy that the LDS
Mhm.
Church taught us Christianity
Uh-huh.
went through in order to become corrupted and require the restoration through
Yep.
Joseph Smith of Mormonism. Yeah, that's exactly what they did, because they went out doing their missionary work. They went to the other countries like Germany or whatever, and then they adopted their pagan
Yep.
celebrations, and they corrupted Christianity. That was part of it. They corrupted Christianity. And I mean, there's a part in the autobiography of Parley P. Pratt. It's toward the end. I think he was down in Chile doing his missionary work there. I think that's the country in South America he went to. And it talks about watching the Catholics doing their celebration on Corpus Christi,
Mhm.
the holy day of Corpus Christi, and just lambasting it for how pagan it is. And now what we pushed out the front door is coming back in through the back, and Mormonism is an apostasy by its own definition.
Yep, according to its website. But again, if you notice, these traditions, they're not celebrated in exactly the way all of other Christianity does. So they're calling it Good Friday or Palm Sunday, but they're putting their own special twist on it, which I feel that's what the restoration is, right? Joseph Smith and others, their twist on, doctrines from the past. So this is the main reason I wanted to talk about this, because it's a PSA, public service announcement. So Elder Oaks says, as an example of such celebrations, he's talking about the different things you can adopt. We can be inspired by the Easter Sunday practice in some parts of the world where believers greet one another with a 3-word exclamation: "He is risen." The person so greeted responds with the same words, "He is risen." So I made this meme because I'm just trying to picture Easter Sunday in Mormondom, where half of the people got this memo and half didn't. And you're going to have somebody come up to you and go, "He is risen." And the other person in my meme says, "What? What?" So this
Where
is
is
a
this
PSA.
done?
What?
Where is this done in the world? I'm not doubting that it's done
Somebody told
somewhere,
me
because
Romania for sure. So I think
where?
it might be an
Romania?
Orthodox. Yeah, I think it might be an Orthodox
Easter?
tradition. Hopefully somebody in the chat knows this. But I think it should be a PSA, because your friends and family are going to be maybe coming at you going, "He is risen," right? So it would go like this. I would say to you, RFM, "He is risen." And you would say back,
My 3 words back are F. Jacob Hansen.
That's not how it's supposed to be. Okay, you try it on me.
No, it's
After
not.
me,
But you have to hear
try it
Mormonism
on
After
me.
Dark to
Say,
hear the whole
"He is
thing.
risen" to me. I'll show them how it's done. Say it
I'm
to
sorry,
me.
what?
Say it to me.
He is risen.
Blessed be the fruit. Oh, I'm sorry. That was something else. Anyway, Handmaid's Tale, if you've watched it. Yeah, it just seems really strange. And we'll see
No,
if
I actually
anybody does
haven't.
it. I have no idea, but he is risen. And the correct response is to say back, "He is risen." So we'll see what happens. I know.
That is so cringy.
Well, in the South,
Oh, no. It's a
I'm
beautiful
aware of a
tradition.
tradition that nobody knows about up here in the North, that I'm aware of, the Yankees, right? But in Texas, at least, on the 24th of December, it was very when you greet someone, you say Christmas Eve gift
Oh,
during the day. You don't
okay.
have a gift. This is endlessly confusing to me. It's a greeting on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve gift, and the person says Christmas Eve gift back to you, and then you just keep going on your way.
Yeah. No, there are all kinds of traditions like that, but I question the LDS ability to do this. I feel like, as you know, young women are now greeters at the door. I feel like they may be making them do that as the people come in. "He is risen." I
He
don't
is
know. I
risen.
hope.
He is risen. Isn't this like the episode from the original Star Trek series with Landru?
Oh, it could be like Landry with the gong and
What
everybody
were they
goes
saying?
to
There was something where they were saying something.
Yep. No, I think that's right. Anyway,
Actual
so
Viscum.
So at the very 11th hour before the newscast, I came across somebody who sent me this. This is a steak that is going to be fasting for Lent. I'm telling you, you can't make all this stuff up. And again, people are just sort of twisting what these things are and putting a Mormon spin on it, if you can say so. So this is a letter sent out to everybody in this stake. And it says, "Each day as we watch or read the news, hear about the troubling events in our communities, we often feel helpless, wondering what we can do to make a difference. We have an opportunity to turn our faith into action. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we have a powerful tool available to us. You can probably guess what that is. It's fasting and prayer." Then he goes through some scriptures about the power of fasting. And he says, "We invite each of you that are physically able to join us in a special stake-wide effort during the season of Lent, beginning March 5th through April 19th. we are going to unite in a 40-day continuous fast. So it's another one of those that we've reported on before, but this time they're appropriating Lent in order to do this. So a 40-day continuous fast in order to seek greater love and peace in our community. Each day, one or more individuals or families will fast specifically for our homes, neighborhoods, cities to be filled with peace and greater love. It comes through our Savior, Jesus Christ. It tells you to invite your neighbors to do this and your friends to do this. And there's going to be a sign-up sheet. And again, they're calling it during the Lent season. Now, if you know what Lent really is and fasting is, you do give something up, something that matters. A lot of people choose chocolate, right? I think that's what I would choose. Maybe
There's
diet.
another attorney who since passed, who was a friend of mine. He was a not non-devout Catholic, and I once asked him what he would give up for what he was going to give up for Lent, and he said sobriety.
Yeah. I like that. There's a workaround. It's good. But you know, and this is a time-honored tradition. This is an ancient tradition. It's a sacred and holy tradition. And you can probably guess what I'm going to talk about with that Monopoly board right there. But so how you do Lent is you give something up. There are different holidays throughout it. You do fast on, I think, Good Friday, and there's two. What does it say? You fast on 2 of the days. Good Friday and Ash Wednesday. And then on every Friday through the season, you give up meat. You can eat fish, but you give up meat. And there's specific criteria here. You don't have to fast if you're under 18 or over 59. So they're taking into I know, I still would have 1 more year. So they're taking into consideration, you know, it's not going to be like me as a 6-year-old fasting for 24 hours. No, that's not going to happen. But as somebody I saw said in the comments, it just takes this, you know, this sacred and holy tradition, and it turns it into Bob Ross Monopoly. If you have seen Heretic, this is one of the arguments that Mr. Reed, who's talking to the missionary sister, said. He goes, you have Christianity, and that's like the original Monopoly that no one even knows. This woman invented it a long time ago. Somebody stole it from her basically and turned it into Monopoly that we all know. Right. So that's Christianity. He said, you know what Mormons are? And he threw this game down on the table. Bob Ross Monopoly, just a bastardized version, a twisted version of these traditions. So yes, they may be celebrating Good Friday. You know, we may see Elder Bednar with ash on his forehead in the coming years. Who knows? But it's just a weird twist on it. And it does seem a little bit sacrilegious to me. And I know they're just trying to enter mainstream Christianity, but again, it's just awkward. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but yeah, Lent, I was stunned.
I expect that all we're seeing is the Mormons taking from the Christians what they took from somebody else. And that's what you mean by that.
Monopoly, exactly. It's all passed down. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I don't know why there's
any... as Paula Abdul says.
I'm sorry, what?
Make it your own, as Paula Abdul used to say on American Idol, circa 15 years ago.
As soon as you said Paula Abdul, you had my attention.
I knew I did.
Isn't it? It is crazy that the Mormonism we grew up with warned us about not letting these kinds of things, the pagan stuff that Christianity adopted long after Christ, into the process. And here it is. I will say, though, I love Lent. And I love Lent because almost at every restaurant, you get 2 fish sandwiches for the price of 1. So I like
There's a bright side.
That's right.
It's rather mercenary of you, Mr. Reel.
Yeah.
I like that.
All right. So thank you, Rebecca, for a little bit there on Easter. Let me start with you, RFM.
Bill, can I say something? Okay, I want to say something right now.
Please.
You said it. I want to underscore it because it's just so important. What the heck is going on with the Mormon Church? When I joined it in 1978, back in 1978, when I joined the Mormon Church, no, they were absolutely against this. And they pointed the finger. They were up in that great and spacious building, pointed the finger at all of those Catholics doing the Lent thing and doing everything, right? All these pagan holidays. Of course, we did Christmas, because we made an exception for that kind of, because it's fun. But other than that, no, this is terrible. This is terrible. It's a sign of apostasy, and we don't do that, sniff, sniff. And we don't wear those crosses either, sign of apostasy. Everything the Christians did that we didn't do was a sign of apostasy, and now we're doing it.
Yeah, it's just, I believe, to appear to be more mainstream. So even we've talked about before the language. I saw a post today where they said, "Is it my imagination?" This was on the Faithful sub, that people don't say Heavenly Father anymore. Like we were all, you had to say Heavenly Father. That was the verbiage. It's now God. We used to not say Jesus. It was the Savior, and now it's Jesus. And these are all just common terms in Christianity, so that people can understand we're just like them. Missionaries can make sense. The good news, right? My parents would roll over in their graves.
Oh, right.
They knew it was the good news. I mean, they would absolutely, that would not be acceptable
It's not a
whatsoever.
temple anymore. It's house
Nope,
of Heavenly
it's a
Father.
house of the Lord. Yep, it's
House
Bible
of the Heavenly
study.
Father. House of the Rising Sun.
It's Bible study, and then they whip out the Book of Mormon subtly. So all these words are just to make us appear more mainstream, but we're not.
Pardon me
There
while
are
I
things
whip
that
this
you
out.
can't, you cannot excuse away, and there's no word for it in Christianity. So interesting.
What is
What
this,
I-
Mr. Reel?
This is The Great Apostasy by James E. Talmage.
Oh yeah.
I read
And I'll
that.
just note here, internal causes continued. So this is going through early, Christian church where it starts to get off into apostasy. And if you go to internal causes continued, second specific cause, unauthorized addition to the ceremonies of the church, the introduction of vital changes in essential ordinances, simplicity of early form of worship ridiculed, formalism and superstition increase, adoration of images, changes in baptismal ordinance. And you go through and you read the Great Apostasy, the indulgences, authority asserted by the Pope, indulgences or pardons, revolts against. When you read it, you start to realize like everything that Mormonism is sort of getting away from and beginning to implement goes right along with what Talmage sort of warned about in the Great Apostasy. Anyway, there's
Before you know it, we're going to be wearing crosses around our necks.
yeah, members
Already
already doing
happened.
it.
Already happened. They just don't sell them at Deseret Book yet. It's the taco and the open tomb. But yeah, people wear crosses now all the time.
It really is interesting that in the space of not many years, to quote Elder Bednar, but in the space of really not many years, since 1978, okay? What is that, 45, 47 years? In that space of time, the church has gone from denouncing people who wear crosses or using the cross as a religious symbol. And now apparently, I mean, I think it's just the next step. You're saying it's already happening? Is that right, Rebecca?
Oh yeah, Christian jewelry is huge. I once rode a commuter train with a huge group of LDS youth that had just gone to an LDS youth conference rock concert, and I kind of took note. A lot of them had cross bracelets. They had cross necklaces. They were talking about the songs and we've talked about the music before. It's very common now. They're entering the mainstream Christianity with Christian jewelry.
There was never anything wrong about a cross. I think that it was used primarily by the church, and I know that they had crosses in architecture, etc., and even I think a cross as a statue in the ground somewhere in Utah. I can't remember exactly where, up to the early 20th century. But then it came into disrepute and disfavor as it associated with Catholicism, and we distance ourselves from all the rest of Christianity, including the cross. And that's when I joined the church. When we're in this process, we're distanced from everybody. We are different. The pictures that we're showing and the stories that we're telling are Mormon-centric. We're talking about Joseph Smith and the things he did and all those kinds of things, almost to the exclusion, not entirely, of course, of other stories that are shared with the Christian community. But we want to focus on what makes us different. I can't tell you how many times I talked about that you are a peculiar people. You are different. You are set apart. You are supposed to be different. And we have the Lord's truth. And now, in 47 years, now we're just throwing it all overboard. And I think that what it shows is it shows how attractive it is to be part of the club. Yeah. Even a church that was all on board for saying we're not like them has now, within 50 years, saying we want to be like you, right? We want to be like you. Please accept us. What?
They're just discovering it. That's what really bothers me. It's like they've invented it. Like, oh my goodness, there's this amazing day. It's called Good Friday.
Is Elder Oaks really saying we've told you about this? We've
Yeah,
always
well,
done this.
they're saying we're so excited to see you now deciding to do it. Well, we don't decide to do anything. We're told to do it from the pulpit, and then we do it. Remember the day of thanks that they kind of invented? I think it was 3 years ago, this amazing
Yes,
idea
yes.
that at the end of November, there would be a day of thanks. I mean, they just like to take things and make it their own. But
You mean
I
like
feel
Thanksgiving?
That's what I'm saying. You mean
That's
like
a great idea.
Thanksgiving? Exactly. It's like what if they invented a day at the end of December where you gave gifts to people? It would be incredible. And again, they would have invented it. But
Yeah.
I've heard other people express this, and they may think that they're entering Christianity mainstream, but they're going to find that they're not Christian enough. There's just certain things that you cannot cover up. You just can't with all of your, pretending to celebrate things or jewelry. There are just certain doctrines that are not. They don't belong in the Christian mainstream.
Well, they have to give up the Book of Mormon. They're never going to give
Think
up
of the new
Book of Mormon.
intro. What happened to the new intro that they finally took out? It was very Christian. God loves you. God is your friend. God is, that was their attempt to be more Christian.
I think you're right.
Orthodox members said, no way. We need it all spelled out. Jaredites, Nephites, golden plates. So they're in this tug of war, I think, between those of us that were raised that way and are saying that's how it was, and everyone else that says it was never that way. It's very interesting. They'll have to wait for us to die out, I think.
And what I'm saying is that changing the introduction to the Book of Mormon doesn't change the fact that the Book of Mormon rubs I'd say the vast majority of at least evangelical Christianity the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because there's not any scripture outside the Bible. That's why they took out the part in the first changed introduction. They took out the part that it's scripture comparable to the Bible. But now it's back in because of the hubbub that got raised.
Yeah, no, that's the main reason they say we are not Christian, because they very firmly say there is no other scripture other than the Bible. That's the main reason. It's
usually that, or we believe works are necessary to salvation, or we don't believe in the Trinity.
Yep.
Those
what use? So again, the way Mormonism positioned itself with a restoration, as the restoration, if after the apostasy, things like Good Friday and Lent and the celebration of those things come into existence, wouldn't Mormonism object to anything that came in created by Christianity outside of the original ancient Church of Christ?
That's what we did.
They should, but there's no apostasy now. I mean, you've seen that discussed too, that there really was no apostasy. We got that
These
wrong.
are linked. Absolutely.
So,
these ideas are linked.
By the
Got rid of
time
the apostasy, and now we're just going to embrace everybody and hope they'll embrace us back.
Yeah, by the time you accept Lent as a part of Christianity that you celebrate, you're acknowledging that something came into Christianity that you're approving of after the fact that you would have claimed was created post facto from Christ in the early Christian church. It's just a strange way to sort of pretend to be one of them when deep down, again, it's more doublespeak. You've already established that you want nothing to do with the way that Christianity developed, because you're the restoration and you're outside of that. You're not Protestantism. You're not Catholicism. You are the true and living Church of Christ restored on the earth as it was anciently. Lent wasn't part of that.
And do they even believe that? Look at the question. So you're a real apostle, right? You covered that last week. What did they say? Yeah, maybe. Exactly. All the signs are there.
I think that this is one of the plans that the church is implementing in order to try and keep people from leaving and get more people to join. And once again, I think it's an example of, for every 100 people hacking at the leaves of a problem, there's one striking at the roots. And the church has never gotten even close to thinking about striking at the roots of their particular problem. They're busy doing the leaves all over the place, and none of it's going to make any difference until they actually get serious.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up here. What do you guys have going on this week? RFM, anything from you? Because otherwise I know I've got the episode Wednesday to share.
Absolutely. Because we got Wednesday, and I'll let you talk about that on Mormonism Live. By the way, what if we do this chronologically? Rebecca, what if you go? Because you have something tomorrow night, Rebecca.
I always have something on Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Yes. And we are talking about LDS funerals. There have been a lot of posts lately where people have said, the church hijacked my funeral, or I attended this funeral. I couldn't believe it, the proselyting. So we dug into this, and we're joined by Rob Lauer, who spent a decade or so in the funeral industry. So he had a lot to say, but I admit on the show that I was wrong. I'm the one that misunderstood what an LDS funeral really is. And when you understand what an LDS funeral really is and what it is meant to be, No more hijacking. That's what it always was intended. That was always the purpose. So it was very interesting to dig into this and look at, the handbook and look at some other conference talks and things like that. Funerals aren't what you think. So it should be pretty interesting. 6 p.m. tomorrow night.
Yeah, I came to the conclusion that the church's position was, if you got a bunch of people who are really sad because somebody died and they're starting to worry about the next life, what better time to hit them with the sales pitch for Mormonism?
No, that's it. Or as Landon says, one last church meeting. You have to go to one last, you may be in your casket, but they're going to get you for one last meeting.
All dressed up and no place to go.
All dressed up. Yeah.
RFM, you're muted.
What?
That's a sign I want you to put on my casket at my funeral.
Right.
Remember? I'm reminding you, obviously.
I got to remember that.
God. Somebody remind him, please.
Yeah. You just put an episode out a few days ago, RFM, digging dirt on John DeLynn. This was after the epilogue. Jen, something else came out and it didn't get much visibility. So you made sure that it became part of the public record, which I think if anybody's following this case, this was important. Anything you want to say about this?
It's doing very well in the polls. I can't remember what it's up to. Of course, I don't even know what it's up to now because I haven't checked it recently. These are all the words that one says while they're furiously checking something.
14,
so it's probably around, I don't know,
14,891.
Wow, you are so fast. How are you so fast?
14,891 because I've got YouTube Studio pulled up.
You're amazing. Okay. So 14,000, huh?
Yeah.
That went up Saturday. It's just amazing.
It's 15,000 now because I'm looking in the place that's more current.
Wow.
15,000 views. Yeah.
Well, it's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating psychopathy. And I think that's part of the reason that people want to watch this, and the drama involved and the complete dissolution of this whole case. It's all very strange. And yet I'm just putting mostly up the evidence. Recently in the epilogue and in this one, I am allowing myself a little more freedom to make commentary than I have in the past. And hopefully that's okay. And everybody's okay with that. But yeah, it was really, really interesting. She's calling up over 4th of July weekend last year, 2024, to somebody that somehow she knows was at a Thrive conference several years before that. Don't know how she knew the phone number. And is trying to get some dirt on John DeLynn. And it ends up, in my opinion, making her look kind of worse than it does John.
How are the ways one gets the phone numbers for strangers that one saw a long time ago? It is interesting. I'll also just note this Wednesday for Mormonism Live, we will have an episode. Goodbye Magic Undies, a longtime listener of our content, Carrie Sweet, a new LDS author, will come on to talk about her book and as well as the journey that got her to the point where she wrote this. So we'll have Carrie Sweet on Wednesday. And then I'll just note too, because it's upcoming, this happened recently where somebody who did some work with the Strengthening Church Members Committee acknowledged that they played a part in passing along the information on my episode about Jeffrey R. Holland, liar, liar, pants on fire, printed it off and was responsible to turn it in to my stake president. And notice there she apologizes. I'm sorry, Bill, but she worked at church headquarters. She was tasked with printing one of my Facebook posts, and she printed it off in black and white. And I'll pull up the other one here. She printed it off in black and white, but the SCMC said, no good. Go back, print in color. So she printed it in color because they wanted the red liar stamp to stand out.
Well, it brings out his eyes.
It does. It does. It played a part in my excommunication. And so Kate is her name. Kate will be on Mormonism Live in 2 weeks to tell that story. She'll also come on this Wednesday for just a few minutes to announce a project that she's working on because the project falls in between the two episodes. Then we'll interview Carrie. And then next week, we'll have Kate on to tell us about this whole episode, which should be, I think, a lot of fun. So
I'm looking forward to it. I am wondering if she ever laid sight on the great white whale known as the RFM disciplinary file.
Yeah, we'll have to ask her and see what other interactions she's had with you, me, and maybe other content creators in this space.
From what I have heard, it has caused not a few hernias.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Radio Free Mormon, thank you very much. Rebecca Biblioteca, thank you very much. To all of you who joined the show, either by listening or watching live or otherwise, we deeply appreciate you staying with the Mormon Newscast and having this be your number one source for Mormon news. We appreciate each of you very much. Tune into Rebecca Biblioteca's Mormonish tomorrow night, correct?
Yeah, 6 p.m. Mountain Time.
Wednesday, Mormonism Live. Friday, Mormonism After Dark. And otherwise, we'll see you on the flip side next Monday night, 6 p.m., the Mormon Newscast. Have a great night, everybody.
Gordon B. Hinckley here. That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. And remember, Mormon was a good word before it was a bad one. # Hinckley was a better prophet.